Saturday View on Midlands 103. With thanks to Laois Cllr Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LaoisCllRenergy.com. Have your say. Call 0818 300 103. Text or WhatsApp your Saturday View to 083 3010 103.
Hello and a very good morning, and it's time for you to have your Saturday View on what appears to be a glorious day weather-wise across the Midlands. Ronan here with you, taking you right up till 11 o'clock. So coming up over the next hour, I'll be talking about why you need to start basic strength training no matter what your age or experience. There's some kind of concerning empirical evidence around those who have never engaged in any form of physical training or exercise, and it doesn't mean you have to run out there and join the latest CrossFit or High Rocks gym or take on these crazy insane challenges, but it means just bringing a little bit of physical activity into your day, irrespective of your previous exercise experience or whether you were once a high-end athlete but have just kind of fallen off that wagon ever since. We're going to look at the impact not exercising has and not bringing some form of weight training, and thankfully there's plenty of solutions, and like a lot of things, small steps or small changes can make a huge difference to the quality of life as we all get older and age. I'll also be talking to two of the newly elected Cathaorileach from the Midlands. So from Westmeath County Council, I'll be talking to McDaniel, and in Laois County Council, Padraig Fleming will join me later too, and we're just going to talk about what their objectives are for the next 12 months. What were they initially going on the campaign trail about? What did they learn from you, the electorate and voters, and how will they incorporate that into their objectives and mission for the year ahead? So again, if you have any comments or you want to pass on your congratulations to those two guys, or if you want to put anything towards them, let me know. 083 3010 103, as always, the text and WhatsApp number. But to begin this morning, I'm delighted to have a man who has been in studio with me before, but it's a story that continues to grow, and every time he comes in he tells me something new about it, and you're kind of going, wow, things are really, really taking off. Brendan Guinan from Fearbia Farm. Now, even the most amateur Gael goers in you out there will know that Fearbia, when you translate it, is true food. It's a regenerative farmer based in Portlaoise, and I suppose that's where the story begins. Let's tap in and see exactly what regenerative farming is. Now, Brendan is here for another reason as well. We'll more on that later on when I mention kind of crazy physical challenges. Brendan, just take us through a recap of regenerative farming.
How are you, Ronan? Yeah, regenerative farming is a positive news story, basically. It's about incorporating nature into your farm and mimicking nature. So you look at what you have around you, what's growing, and you enhance that to its best ability using animals, using green leaves, basically. The sun, the sun is a huge important part of regenerative farming. You want to capture the solar energy from the sun with a green leaf, push it, encourage it into the soil, and from the roots of the soil then that will grow the microbes in the soil, and that energy cycle is kicked off then, and really you just have to stand back and manage it after that.
So traditionally we would have looked at a forest like where your farm is and said, right, let's clear that, let's make it a grassland, let's add fertilisers, let's put cattle, sheep, pigs on it, and let's give them loads of antibiotics. Is that, you've basically stood back and said, no, we're going to use the forest and use every element of it?
Yeah, well, most farmers don't like using chemicals, but they feel like they have to, or that it's their only option. But they see forestry, especially as being ruining land. You know, the roots will take up room in the soil, and it will dry out the soil, and it will take nutrients from the soil that you could grow to prevent you from growing other plants that actually make you money. But instead of that, what a forest does, it gives you the power to create microclimates in the forest. And that microclimates where you can have shelter from the north, or from the northern winds, or from whatever prevailing winds you have. It does keep the soil drier as well with the roots, but it also helps you infiltrate more rain. It insulates you from extreme climate events, whether it's wind, whether it's rain, whether it's snow. The trees actually enhance the ecosystem for the animals to grow, so you can actually graze them out longer. You can, because they're less stressed, you know, when you're in on concrete. Now, I'm not giving out about concrete or giving out about slats or whatever, but cattle aren't that comfortable on them, even with mats and whatever else. It's still cold. I outwinter my cattle and pigs in a pine forest. So it has fresh air all the time, lovely deep pine needles underneath that's warm. So that's where I don't need to use antibiotics, because the animals are actually comfortable. Same as us. If we're stressed out, we have more of a chance of getting diseases and getting picking up. Like stress is a huge problem. So if you can reduce the stress on the animal, it reduces the chances of them being sick. And then obviously, if they're not sick, I don't need to dose them. If they did get sick, I would use antibiotics because for animal welfare reasons, but I try and design a system where they don't need them in the first place.
And how do you then control if there were, other insects or slugs or snails that it could affect the health of an animal as well? Or is the forest actually self-controlling?
Well, that's the diversity, and that goes back to one of the key principles of regenerative farming, that you don't have a dairy farm on its own, you don't have a beef farm on its own, you don't have a poultry farm on its own. Each system has pros and cons, but the waste of one system is actually the resource for the next. So say we have poultry, cattle, pigs, turkeys, eggs, bees, firewood. I think that's it. But
so far.
So far is right, yeah. But the poultry is our fertilisation programme for the farm. So the poultry move every day to a new site. They're also my parasitic control for our beef and pigs, because they're end host to each other's pathogens. So the hens always go last and the turkeys always go last. And they will actually clear out any parasites that the cattle and the pigs leave behind. So also, I don't let the cattle graze too deep. I leave 1/3 of the grass behind. That's where the parasites are, in the last third of the grass. So if you don't force your animals to graze that last third, give that to the hens, and your cattle get better grass, but they don't get any parasitic infestation, I suppose is the word. Yeah,
I can just picture the hens and the turkeys in little high-vis vests, as your parasite control team. I can't get that image out of my head. But when it comes to creating and managing a regenerative farming, then, like, if you go organic, there's supports out there, there's lots of enticements. For regenerative, is it seen as almost like a pariah, or is it now being seen as something that really there's a future in this? And I suppose we speak in the context of the Nature Restoration Bill being passed this week, and will have big ramifications on the agricultural sector.
Yes, well, regenerative farming, because it's seen to be working, because animals are actually healthier, because it's creating a better income per acre than even dairying for a lot of farmers. It's been noticed now. Like next Thursday, I'm speaking at the Dairy 4.0 Summit in Portlaoise. They asked me to talk about how we can incorporate regenerative farming into commercial dairying. That's the first time. They came to me and asked, they really want to know, they see the change, but they don't understand how it's happening and where to go. So regenerative farming is a revolution in agriculture, and Ireland is perfectly situated with the cool temperate oceanic climate that it can there's no major extremes in weather, so you can actually graze animals, pigs, poultry, cattle, everything outside all year round through targeted ecosystems and different forestry, but even on the sides of mountains. I'm working with a group of farmers up in Donegal who graze their dexters out every summer on the lowlands and every winter on the highlands, and spectacular beef. And I'm only getting to know people as we're. There's a huge revolution going on. I'm still only at the tip of the iceberg as to who's out there. Interesting,
yeah. It's almost like, certainly when I was growing up, if you had a nosebleed, you put the head back and held it. Now you put it down. And it's amazing how kind of theories and yes, stuff changes, and it can take a while for people to start really twigging onto it and asking those questions. But you mentioned there how the income per acre is actually better than traditional farming, and this is an important one because you've created a fantastic business out of this. to the point where I know before, when I was talking to Aidan Barry just before the show on air there, mentioned how you're supplying some of the top restaurants in Ireland, but I've actually undersold you on that. But just give us an example of the type of product you're supplying, and even some of the restaurants and chefs that are, as it sounds, basically beating on your door to get their hands on the meat you're producing.
Well, the same as the farmers, appealing to farmers to actually come on board now, it's appealing to customers, and it's also appealing to businesses and chefs. And that's the human element, because we base all our products on health, from the healthy soil, from the health of the environment, to the health of the animal, to the health of the meat and products that we produce. And so there's no downside whatsoever. So we don't add excess water to our hams and bacon and stuff like that. It's dry cured. So same with sausages and burgers. There's no fillers in them. It's pure meat. We mix our own seasoning. We use local abattoirs. We try and support the local economy as well. But when it comes to selling the produce, it's crazy. There's a backlog all the time, especially with the eggs, the meat. We've almost 500 families we deliver all around the country on a monthly basis. Everything we sell is frozen because we put no preservatives in anything. And because of that, the natural way of preservation is actually freezing. So if you buy a month's worth of meat off me, you're going to freeze it anyway. We flash freeze it direct from the butcher as soon as it's packed to lock in that freshness. And it's crazy. A lot of chefs in Ireland now that we're dealing with are telling their friends in England and Europe, and now we're actually sending boxes of meat to Germany, to Greece, to Spain, to Switzerland, and this is with zero marketing.
That word of mouth between those high-end chefs as well. You talked about how the cattle, the pigs live in a stress-free environment. Does that have a direct impact on the quality of meat then? Totally
different. We feed no meal to our cattle, so they grow slower. Same with the pigs. In industry, a piglet from piglet to plate is 4 months. We're up to a year because we want that animal to maintain the forest, basically, or maintain the land, root it up. Pigs are incredibly regenerative if managed properly. So small paddocks, move them on, depending on the weather, the size of the animal, the time of year. Give the ground a little bit of a fluff up. That wakens the latent seed bank in the soil, and incredible multi-species regeneration happens. And but if you leave that same pig too long in the one place, it turns into devastation, and compaction and whatever else. So that's our theory. Hit it hard, move it on, and then rest and see what comes back. So no reseeding, no ploughing, no roundup. It's not needed. As you build the life in the soil and the energy in the soil, it's actually amazing what grows.
Absolutely. Well, the detractors are out there too, because we've had an email in from somebody suggesting that more climate change BS here on the radio, and asking, are we still hurting that the Greenies lost so badly? This has got nothing to do with politics. This is just looking at a system of farming that is working, has gained the attention both nationally and internationally for the product that Brendan, and as he said, he's discovering people across the country who are trying similar things. People are trying new things, new ideas, and actually probably not that new, because this is going back to the way farming would have been done years ago. So this is not about party politics. This is not about trying to push a climate agenda. Bear in mind, we live in the Midlands here. And I can remember, it's not that far back that people used to actively dump the rubbish in bog holes in order to help fill them. So times change, our opinions change and how we did things. I think it's always important that we have alternative views and ways of doing it. And Brendan is putting forward a very interesting case study on this. Is it very different than conventional farming or the farming that we grew up with? Absolutely. But does that mean we discredit it? Absolutely not. And things are changing, times are changing, and that is one thing for sure. Thank you though for your email as well, and I say continue listening because this story gets bigger too. And as always, if you want to join this conversation, 083 3010 103, text and WhatsApp number here on Midlands 103. Brendan, you mentioned about discovering other people who were doing regenerative farming around the country, but you've also brought this a little step further, and you're basically going to cycle, is it the length of the country?
Yeah, well, I was trying to figure out a way of actually connecting farmers together, regenerative farmers together and organic farmers together. farmers are not very good at actually working well together. They're a little bit suspicious, or a little bit worried that it's tough to actually get people to relax and actually open up, especially men.
Yeah.
So I did a master's down in Galway a couple of years ago, and the thesis was on actually bringing regenerative farmers together in one umbrella group and to improve efficiencies and all that kind of stuff. I approached a lot of farmers. They didn't really trust what I was talking about, so I come up with this idea of doing a Malin to Mizzen cycle from Donegal to Cork.
Not a WhatsApp group like.
Not yet, no. This Malin to Mizzen, because regenerative farming is happening literally nationwide. And it's not just Ireland, it's a movement all over the world. But the more people I was meeting and talking to, I said, we have to go national with this. It's not a local or regional thing. So on the 24th of August, we're cycling from Malin Head in Donegal. It's a wander down the country. And we're going to end up in Mizzen Head a week later, hopefully. A normal Malin to Mizzen is 680 kilometres. We're going to be doing over 1,000 kilometres because we're going to be calling into regenerative farms the whole length of the country. So we're going to be eating all our own food, so no protein shakes or bars or whatever else, to show that plain healthy food, as close to the primary producer as possible, is the way to go. You get all your nutrients from that. We've got 22 farmers signed up at the moment that are going to do it. So it's really a wander down the country, visiting the farms. We're going to highlight health. So like regenerative farming is all about health. So your healthy body to be able to cycle, your healthy mind, the mental health, the communities, building communities together, the healthy food, the healthy farms, the healthy soil, the healthy animals and environment. And going back to the nature restoration laws and farming in general, most farmers see nature and farming as being separate. They need to be intertwined. They should be embedded with one another. And I think that's a huge message that needs to get out there. So we've sponsors already. Like this was me that started this, but a committee has been set up because it's got too big. Like we've Irish Blood Transfusion Service are sponsoring us. I donate platelets every 28 days in St James's Hospital in Dublin, and they're going to talk at different farms, different evenings about the health of and the importance of platelets. The RDS, Ballymaloe Cookery School, James Whelan Butchers, Ashford Castle, Field Exchange, they've all come on board. Now, we have a GoFundMe page for ordinary say people if they want to help us out as well. But rather than just giving money, if you turn around and seek out a regenerative farmer in your area and actually support them and buy their products, that would be worth any more money than any GoFundMe can do, or and then understand how they raise their animals, understand how it works, and realise that you're actually building your own health, the health of your own family then as well. It'd
be very interesting analysis to see actually looking at that, as you say, even the health and the energy aspect of doing that cycle and using food from regenerative farms as well, because I suppose crucially, and people often think of organic or regenerative as anti-meat. Actually the meat and the protein is such the fundamental part it is for yourself and these farmers, so it kind of almost quells that argument too. Brendan, it's a fascinating story. When you say you're doing the cycle?
It's the 24th of August to the 31st of August. We're starting in Malin Head. We're going to be cooking every evening, as I say, on each farm. We're actually, if you want to meet me anytime, I'm going to be cooking at the Electric Picnic this year, down beside the minefield and the Theatre of Food. And we have a shop open every Saturday on our farm. If you want to come and see the farm, we have an open farm. You can come and see the place. We do farm walks. Like, we're proud of what we do, and we want to sing from the rooftops about it. So it's I don't know, good news story There
Absolutely,
you go.
no, incredible too. And as every time I seem to meet you, there's always another extension to it now with that expansion into Europe as well. And when you have people like Enterprise Ireland beginning to knock on your door or your trees, something is going really right. Brendan is a great. If you want to find out more about Brendan, Fiorby Farm, FIORBHIA farm.ie, or check him out on Instagram. He's very active on social media, particularly Instagram as well. And you can take him up on some of those invitations or get in touch with his products, or maybe you want to join that cycle or support it in some way. But for now, Brendan Guinan, Fiorby Farm, thank you so much as always. Time for me now to take a quick break. After that, we're going to look at just that importance of a bit of physical activity, irrespective of whether you've never done anything or whether you're a prime athlete, how important it is to retain our health and to maintain our mobility, because that mobility really is a huge factor in our comfort and indeed quality of life as we go forward. Even if you're somebody who has an injury, who has a physical ailment maybe that prevents you from doing traditional training or strength training, there are ways of just increasing that strength and hopefully living a longer, healthier life. So that's all coming up after this break.
Saturday View on Midlands 103 with thanks to Laois Cllr Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LaoisCllrEnergy.com.
Still to come this morning on Saturday View, I'll be talking to Councillor Liam McDaniel and Councillor Padraig Fleming. Both have been elected as the Cathaorileach of their respective county councils in Westmeath and in Laois. And we'll just check in and see what their objectives are for the year ahead, and if they discovered or learned anything on the campaign trail that has maybe changed or will inform their stewardship as the Cathaorileach as well. But before that, and just before the break, they're talking to Brendan Guinan from Fiorby Farm, and Brendan mentioned that cycle from Mizen to Malin that they're undertaking in order to raise more awareness and really throw a focus on regenerative farming and what it is and what the potential health benefits are. It ties in nicely with this next segment actually, because Dr. Diane Cooper from EduFit based in Portarlington is with me on the line now, and Diane is an advocate for people to get moving, and particularly nowadays when our lives have become so sedentary, work becomes stuck in front of a computer screen, sitting in a chair. We go from that maybe to sitting at the table to then sitting in front of the TV or another screen or monitor, or maybe even worse, sitting stooped down looking at a phone or a smartphone or a tablet for endless hours, days on days. All of which has an impact on our physiological health and indeed our mental health too. And if you think about it, sometimes it's people can't find time maybe to get up and do some basic exercise, and often it's because those feckin' algorithms that are the absolute genius work of these big social media companies, they're designed to draw people in, to catch people, to beat that distraction and rob them maybe of valuable time. That's my view on this anyway, but let's check in with somebody who's educated around this area and knows a thing or two about it, because Dr. Diane is a clinical exercise physiologist and a health researcher too. Very good morning, Diane.
Good morning, Ronan. Thanks for having me on.
Diane, some people are going to be listening thinking, oh, here they go again, talking about physical activity, strength training, movement. Will they just shut up and leave us alone?
It's Saturday, I know.
It's Saturday, but there is there's a lot of empirical evidence behind this, and it is something that you're deeply passionate about. And you're going to give us some examples today of, irrespective of your previous history, whether you were once a very active sports person or a walker and you've just kind of given that up over the years, or whether you're somebody who's never really done any actual exercise per se, but now would like to do something, and everything in between. Maybe there's an ailment or the body is worn a little bit that's preventing us from it. And I know you often say there's no time, it's never too late to start as well. So the benefits of doing some form of physical activity and strength training, what are they?
Yeah, so look at numerous. Now, to be honest, like I could lecture in this for months, never mind a few minutes of a presentation, but like I'm 20 years working with all types of people, so all ages, all abilities. As you said, some are athletes, some were athletes, many have one or multiple clinical conditions, some people have physical disabilities, all sorts of stuff. But one of the things, and I'll say even for myself, I've experienced every end. I've experienced as a young child being very overweight and very unfit, moving from there through to nearly being an elite athlete. Like my longest event was 40 days, 17 hours a day kayaking around Ireland. So I've been on every spectrum of the health and fitness thing, and even at the moment with pregnancy, I'm very sick. It's causing me a whole pile of problems. And so within everyone's lifespan, you are at some part on the physical activity and health spectrum, and it can change depending on what's going on in your life. But I am in a privileged position to be observing people as part of my work daily, and it reminds me daily just to move, do anything you can when you can. So what happens with the sedentary side of stuff, and people will have seen this in COVID, particularly with older people, where because of all of the restriction and couldn't go outside, all of the intensive sedentary behaviour, older people deconditioned really, really quickly. They got very frail, they had falls, their clinical conditions accelerated. But as well as that, what you have to remember, we're talking about training and we're talking about muscle and trying to maintain it, or how quickly you lose it when you're sedentary. That's in the limbs, yes, and people will talk about loss of strength and loss of fitness and loss of balance. But the other side of it is, if you have that level of muscle atrophy in the extremities, you have issues with brain as well. So you have issues with brain health, you have issues with cognition. We had massive rises in the prevalence of Alzheimer's and things like that with COVID. Now, I'm using COVID as an example because people will generally have some way of relating to that with the stories in their own lives. But for us, you mentioned sedentary behaviour, where we sit a lot. And naturally, without a sedentary lifestyle, naturally we lose muscle every year after the age of 35, right? And of course you won't notice it. You won't notice it probably for another 10 years later. And then all of a sudden it's, I'm stiff, I'm sore, I've pain, I'm struggling to get, huffing and puffing to get out of the car. And you start to notice that the daily things are getting a little bit harder. And that is, don't make the mistake of putting that down to age. That is mostly because we're not using our muscles, and they're just you're just getting atrophy, and that's the consequence of it. You can't do the things that you used to do. Whereas literally every bit of movement counts. Anything you do is better than nothing. And strength work, as we move through our 40s and 50s and 60s, strength work becomes really, really, really important, that you don't get that muscle loss. And talking about benefits, we could be here all day, preventing clinical disease, everything. Yeah,
even on your own social medias there with EduFit, you shared some kind of sample images of an MRI between a trained 70-year-old woman versus an untrained one, and the difference is, it's immediately apparent.
It's astounding. So this is why we do this. So I'm a lecturer and a researcher at the start of my career, but when we run courses or whatever we do, we don't just put people in a room and start getting them to train, because unless you understand the whys and how-tos and what you're doing and how to progress and all these things, it makes it difficult for people to adopt and maintain the behaviours. But coming back to that scan, I've sat in many rooms with people between 40 and 80 years of age, loads of people in a room, and if you just sit there and watch how they move, watch how they get out of a chair, watch the balance that they have and the confidence and the assertiveness and all of these things, you can see really clearly who has lost a lot of muscle and who hasn't. And the reason I put that scan up is because, as a researcher, we're so privileged. We get to test muscle samples and blood samples and all sorts of stuff, and it really reinforces the reason why I do what I do, because I see the evidence all of the time. So what we try to do then in EduFit is show other people, and that's what you saw. And so for anyone who hasn't seen it, it was an MRI scan of a thigh. So basically you're looking at muscle mass, fat mass, and that big long bone in the thigh, that's the femur. And if you knew nothing about science and you just look at the trained person, a trained 70-year-old, if you look at a scan of a thigh, it effectively looks like steak. It looks like a big, thick steak. There's lots of muscle there. It's very strong. They're not going to have any problems with balance or functionality or being dependent on people. And it generally translates to not having things like Alzheimer's and dementia and, a lot of physical problems and health conditions. But if you take me, my job, I could be 10 hours a day sitting in a chair. If I don't do anything to counteract that, and I just let that happen to me for the next 20 years, then you end up in the other situation where that muscle literally shrinks and wastes away, because if you don't use it, you literally lose it. So you become really, really frail. You lose the ability to do so many things. But if I take a blood test on that person, you'll see high sugar levels, high cholesterol levels, and all of these other markers of ill health. But you mentioned mental health. If you don't have the functionality to do the things that you want to do in the day, and if you don't have good energy, and you're in a lot of pain and stiffness, and you're just everything is a struggle with that level of weakness. That has major mental health consequences as well. And as I mentioned before, it can really exacerbate things like dementia and cognitive issues.
But
there's 101 reasons.
There's a societal kind of attitude and behaviours thing to this as well. If we think of sports stars, soccer players, male or female, when they get into their kind of mid-30s, they're generally classed as they're coming near the later stages of their career and they'll probably move on from a club. Same with GAA players, can they now play it until they're 35? We do similar in the workplace. Oh, somebody's turned 60, maybe they're past it, which really is that's an abomination. We shouldn't be thinking that way at all. I mean, sports careers can start in your 40s or 50s.
For sure. And I'll tell you one thing, Ronan, again, I get to see these things all the time. I have seen people in their 70s stronger and fitter than the people in their 30s because of how they live their life and the things that they do. And even in terms of positive mental health and motivation and just a zest to get out there and do things. Age shouldn't come into that. Now, you did mention the athletes. Of course, if you're at the top of your game, if you're really competing at that top 1% level, over time you do lose that ability to perform with the guys that are 10 years younger than you, but that can translate into other fantastic sporting careers, and you'll see a lot of transitions in the kind of late 30s and 40s from team sports into things like adventure racing and stuff like that. And yes, it's because people want to still feel physically fit and strong and get all of those wonderful benefits, but I guarantee you a lot of the drive for people wanting to stay active who are at that level is actually the mental health benefits.
Absolutely. I think a point well made. And again, EduFit offer edufit.ie is the website there, and actually Diane and her team offer a range of courses that are easy accessible, that can be done online if you need to, just to really show you that you can incorporate that movement, that bit of strength training in, and begin to reap the benefits of it throughout your life, and particularly as you get older. Diane Cooper, as always, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for that this morning. And I think people will sit up and they'll listen and they'll say, you know what, the sun is out, the weather's good, let's get out there and get active.
Thanks so much, Ronan. Thanks a million.
Just move. There you go. You heard it directly from Dr. Diane Cooper there. I'll say a big hello to my own dad. He's 80 at the minute. He's probably not even listening because he's probably on the bog finishing off the turf. And there's an advocate and a real example of what it's like when you just stay active and keep things going. If you can at all, keep it going and just move, as Diane said. Time for a quick break. After that, we'll check in with two of the newly elected Cathaorileach of our local county councils.
Saturday View on Midlands 183 with thanks to Laois Cllr Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LaoisCllRenergy.com.
Following on from the recent local elections, yesterday the Cathaorileach of the county councils of Laois, Offaly and Westmeath were appointed at a meeting in county buildings. I'm going to speak now to some of those people now, and actually you'll know from the local elections, Fianna Fáil ended up being the largest party with 248 seats compared to Fine Gael's 245, so not a huge amount between it, but actually all three Cathaorileach for the three counties are actually members of the Fianna Fáil party. Councillor Tony McCormack has been elected as Cathaorileach for Offaly County Council for the year ahead. Over in Westmeath, Councillor Liam McDaniel regained his seat and has been re-elected for a second term in a row as Cathaorileach. Very good morning, Liam. Congrats on the re-election in both counts, and you're looking forward to the next 12 months ahead, I can imagine.
I am indeed, and thanks for that, Ronan. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next year. I was very proud and delighted again to be selected by my colleagues to serve as Cathaorileach for the coming year. Yeah.
Of course, the results of the local elections, we saw a lot of swing towards maybe some independents, maybe not as many gains for certain parties that people would have anticipated, and a lot of support seeming to remain kind of more in the centre with two of the main government parties there. From the time you started campaigning for this election and your own manifesto, did you learn anything on the ground when you're out talking to people again about maybe what really matters to people, and how are you going to try and influence that in the next 12 months?
Well, I suppose that's where you like getting out on the doorsteps is where you find out what people are thinking, and lots of issues did arise for me on the doorsteps, and I suppose housing, some of them are national issues, some of them are local issues, but housing, rural planning, farming issues, poor roads, against that speed was an issue, and so dereliction dereliction, and another issue that came up on the doorstep. So they're all issues we're going to have to look at, I suppose, as we move forward into the next term now. Yep.
And when you look at dereliction, is that in terms of houses that maybe are more rural, that are underutilised then, or looking right at our towns and village centres where, unfortunately, there's lots of vacant properties and particularly overshot properties that are sitting empty?
Yeah. Well, I would say a bit of both in that case now. Some rural, and you're right, Ronan, in terms of in the towns and villages, some of our shop fronts are empty, and some of our streets are very, very empty in terms of residents and businesses. They're closed up. So something we need to be looking at.
And was the issue of maybe fuel or access to fuel for home heating or stuff, or maybe access or lack of access to grants for retrofitting? Are those issues popping up with people?
Well, I suppose, look, in terms of retrofitting and things like that, it didn't turn up that much on the doorsteps in terms of retrofitting. But I suppose the whole issue of grants for housing adaptation grants, and they would have been issues that were coming up on the doorstep, all right, and that people living in their houses, I suppose, and the elderly population who don't see retrofitting as an option for them, so the kind of grants that they're looking for upgrades of bathrooms and heating grants and heating systems and things, and that's out there, and we need to protect and ensure that those grants are maintained and indeed improved over that. That would be one of my objectives over the next few years.
Absolutely so. And look at a busy 12 months ahead, no doubt, I suppose, part of your 5-year term. Liam, thanks so much for coming on this morning as well. All the very best over the next 12 months, and undoubtedly we'll hear a lot more from you on Saturday View and Midlands today over the coming years. I'm going to bring in Councillor Padraig Fleming now. He's been elected as Cathaorileach of Laois County Council. He was previously the last Cathaorileach of Laois County Council in the last term. And congratulations to you as well, Padraig, on your election.
Thanks, Ronan. Thank you very much.
Padraig, I suppose a very similar question to Liam as well. Was there anything that you picked up on the campaign trail that maybe is something that you would see as being one of your primary objectives in your first 12 months?
Yes, there's been a good few issues at different levels. The development of houses and the building of houses is a big issue. And I'd have to say Laois is the second highest in Ireland per head of population. So things are moving well in Laois, and we wanted to continue to work that way. The upgrading of the road infrastructure, particularly after a severe bad winter and spring, even with the rain, a lot of roads are in a lot worse condition. So we need to get more money in to improve those roads and upgrade them. That's another issue. The other issue we got was that speed on the road is a serious issue. I've been raising myself for a few years in the council. I do a lot of walking, but from listening to people and witnessing the speed on the road, there's no improvement on it.
There's a lot of a challenge. Are you still there, Padraig? I seem to have dropped now. The line just seems to have... Yep. You said with me, Padraig, yeah, we can just hear you there again. It's interesting how your counterpart in Westmeath, Liam McDaniel, said the very same. Actually, speed is an issue being presented on the doors as well. Is that something that you could look at taking immediate action on, and how might you go about that?
Well, we talk about education, and there's plenty of education on it, in the sense that, information comes from the government and all the different groups for people to slow down and be mindful, but it's not working. There has to be a continued focus on it, obviously, and I hope maybe with the new speed limits come in, and we have to see what the new speed limits are going to give us in rural areas and community on roads as well, because we'll know then whether this is going to have an impact. But the reality is a lot of people don't recognise speed limits. I'll be upfront. It's an issue that's close to my heart in the sense of trying to, promote safety on the roads. But look at we'll have to wait and see whether the new rules and regulations are going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And I suppose that could be a major point for us down the road as well.
And a good starting point. I know, I think it's a genuine concern. I think many of us would share that with you. Like, I know as a parent of kids, some who are heading almost for their teens, you're kind of very concerned about sending them out on the public roads with bikes and actually maybe just not doing it. But because of that fear, and certainly we all see it there, people are just blatantly ignoring speed limits. So, no, Padraig, thanks so much as well. Congratulations on your election, both re-election as a councillor and election as Cathaorileach, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
I look forward to it and working for the people of Laois and with the councillors and the management as well, and all communities as well.
Councillor Padraig Fleming, Cathaorileach Laois County Council, thank you so much for that this morning, and that is bringing us to a close for Saturday View today. Thank you to the two newly elected Cathaorileach there. Councillor Tony McCormack will join me next Saturday anyway to talk about his plans and ambitions for his first 12 months in County Offaly. But a big thank you there this morning to Brendan Guinan from Fearbia Farm and to Diane Cooper from EduFit. Now, I've had a few texts asking about the website for EduFit. It's quite simple, EduFit, edufit.ie, and you'll find all the details of Diane's work there, and indeed the little training programs and stuff that they offer. Huge range of stuff. And just again, we mentioned that at the start, we don't want to be trying to become advocates and kind of constantly shouting about this, but it's so important to get some form of movement in, really to try and preserve and cling on to whatever quality of life you have and not let it deteriorate too much. And you can control it, as Diane says, just move is often the great starting point as well. And again, Brendan's story of regenerative farming, and really when his shock, he said, had been asked to present at the Farming 4.0 show recently. He said a real sign that traditional farming is becoming aware of what regenerative farming actually is. But anyway, thank you all for listening. Thank you for your texts. Lorraine McCormack is coming next with Feel Good Saturday. Hopefully she's still in good form anyway. She was at a concert last night, so we'll go easy on her today. I'll talk to you all next week.
You, with thanks to Cllr Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. cllrenergy.com. Midlands 103.